This is the Outpost RBA podcast, where we lead security teams to higher ground and new perspectives needed to secure the frontiers of enterprise, with hosts Will Robus and Stuart McIntosh.
Hello, and welcome to the Outpost RBA podcast. I'm your host, Will Robus, and with me, as always, is my co-host and co-founder, Stuart McIntosh. How are you feeling today, Stuart?
Good. I'm ready for this one. This one will be fun.
Yeah. This was kind of handpicked by you, so we're excited. So today we're going to talk about Murphy's Laws of Combat. This was new to me until Stuart introduced it to me, so maybe it's going to be new for some of you. But we're going to talk through a couple of selective ones that really stuck out to Stuart over the years, and hopefully connect them to how they pertain to defensive cybersecurity. So before we get into that, we're going to go through our housekeeping announcements as usual. First and foremost is a great connection point for online, offline, kind of almost the 24/7 digital presence. We have our RBA community, and you can find and connect with that community at the website rba.community. This is a very active and growing group. I feel like we've had a spike in signups the last 30 days.
Over 830 people now.
Yeah, so that's exciting. As of this recording, we're hosting a in-person meetup at splunk.conf next week. I'm sure we'll talk about that, or have talked about that in previous episodes. But we're super excited to see everyone in person. I think we've got over 200 RSVPs right now, so it should be really.
And don't worry, we'll have notebooks for all the questions for a future Blue Line episode. So yeah, new content for Blue Line.
There you go. We'll have a suggestion box instead of that. It's like tell us your defensive security problems. That content for days. But yeah, so it's the center point of the community is online, but we have multiple events every month, or at least one event every month. It's really this community full of not only RBA enthusiasts and Splunk users, but security practitioners across security organizations, across all different kinds of organizations, public sector, private, small, large, as well as some Splunk partners. So we also, one of the points we like to bring up every time is pretty much anybody that's done a .conf talk about RBA at .conf at Splunk is in the channel and fairly active when they can be, because a lot of them are pretty busy. So and like I said, we do, that is the place. So the RBA community is kind of the web presence. We have a Slack community, which is the kind of chat presence, and that is a good way to stay tuned into when the events are coming out, getting reminders for the events. The main event the primary event every month is a kind of a Q&A office hours meetup, mostly for people to get introduced to the community, but also to bring their questions. We haven't had many customer presentations lately, so I think that's something we want to get back to. It's been a busy year so far. So and then we try to do quarterly workshops around kind of a technical deep dive, data models, assets and identities, kind of your RBA journey, progression kind of piece. So anyway, rba.community to get connected. And of course, you can link to our Slack there, or find the Slack sign up on our website. And then related to getting started in RBA, we've been Outpost Security. So Stuart and I have been offering what we're calling a readiness review to Splunk customers, and that is something that we've probably done a dozen or so now. And it's a really cool free offering that we've enjoyed delivering, but has also produced a ton of value for the customers that work through it. And basically, it is actually, Stuart, can you give a brief description of what the readiness review entails?
Yeah, it's it's an interactive session, about 2 hours long, where we literally step through all the different components of your Splunk environment and enterprise security and kind of see where everything's at. So part of what we've talked about as a company is start with where you're at, pick where you want to go, and then figure out the delta. That's kind of what this readiness review is. And it really focuses on a true kind of honest assessment and troubleshooting of where you're at. So we've come across people who didn't realize that there were a bunch of skipping searches. They always thought they had a data model problem. Turns out they actually have a search problem. So it's kind of this uncovering what's really going on. And then at the end is kind of a prescriptive path of how to knock all these dominoes down in a way that gets you on this RBA journey.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that. I've been part of most, if not all, the readiness reviews, and what's really fun to observe is how you really dig into those key layers of Splunk performance and searches is obviously overarching, but especially the kind of key components of ES. We use built-in dashboards at Splunk that sometimes a lot of people don't know about or like are hard to get to. But it's a 2-hour training session of here's the important parts of ES from a alerting perspective. Here's how you can get some insight into them, monitor them, and then how it all stitches together from essentially the data models, detections, alerts, life cycle, if you will. So it's a really fun. It's fun for me to be involved and watch, and Stuart, I think, really enjoys working with new environments and kind of seeing what's going on.
And I think what's great about it is it's what you don't get from a professional service engagement, because you have to negotiate a statement of work. Well, that requires we know what needs to be worked on, or maybe you get someone who knows Splunk but doesn't know enterprise security or doesn't know security in general. So the data itself, they don't really know how to read it. So it's definitely a really great session for kind of bringing everyone up to speed on what's going on.
Yes, exactly. And I like how you brought it back earlier to, let's meet. We like to meet our customers where they're at. And essentially it's our answer to what we talked about in previous episode about maturity, actually. So it's really our solution to, all right, let's see where you're at. Let's see how we can get you down the road quickly and efficiently to show some wins for you and hopefully your entire team. So again, you can connect with us on our website. There's no less than 12 buttons on the website that says schedule your readiness review. So
just want to make it easy for everyone.
There you go. We like making buttons. So with that, we'll get into our main topic today. As I mentioned briefly in the intro, we are going to dive into Murphy's Laws of Combat. So, it's a little more of an abstract topic today, and I've read through Stuart's notes a little bit, but I'm interested and curious to have him connect this to the realities of defensive security overall, or even organizations as a whole. So let me ask the intro question, Stuart. Like I said, you were the one who introduced me to these laws. I did some internet searching. I tried to find an entry in Wikipedia, but I don't think Wikipedia has an entry describing it, just the general concept of Murphy's laws. And it seemed like they were, the links I found and the references were either academic or presenting them in kind of a humorous, satirical way. So let us, kind of introduce us to how you found them, things like that.
Yeah, I don't, they're definitely not like mathematical laws or physical laws. It's definitely more tongue-in-cheek humor. But I think a lot of them are like these mantras or axioms that encapsulate situations that people are in. And if you've been in it as well, you'll notice it right away and start laughing. And I think this will come out when we read some of them. But yeah, so I first heard about it from Jocko Willink. He on the Jocko podcast, episode 376. Himself and JP Donnell were discussing these. And what I enjoyed was, so they gave some history about Murphy himself. So if you're curious at all where Murphy laws in general come from, he does a really nice kind of backdrop of setting, like, how did this kind of moniker come along? And then the two of them actually kind of go through. It's 21 of these entries for the laws of combat, and so they read them, they kind of pause, they laugh a little to each other, and then they talk about how they've used it, seen it, or heard stories about it. So it's a really great, I think it's like a couple hours, but definitely if these are interesting to you, check out that podcast to get kind of a little more depth to it. But what I wanted to do here was grab just a few that I thought helped when I heard them. How did it help my framing of what we do on security teams protecting companies? So yeah, that's kind of the backdrop to it.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Nothing official, just like one of these, like, hey, let's shake it up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
We're always so serious. Let's have a little fun. Let's think a little abstractly. Let's at least crack a smile.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'm excited. So you've kind of highlighted three. So let's dive in.
It was hard to pick three, by the way. So these are the three that I think make for good stories, but definitely look at all 21 because some of them are pretty funny.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so the first one you've highlighted is rule number 8, according to the list that we'll post on the show notes. And rule number 8 of Murphy's Laws of Combat is: the enemy invariably attacks on 2 occasions: A, when you're ready for them, and B, when you're not ready for them. So yeah, connect this to where did your brain go when you read this?
Every single strategic leadership planning meeting I've ever been in, where they say, oh, we're not going to get to that because it's not the right time. Why don't we worry about that project 6 months from now? Like, it's almost as if prioritization is done in a vacuum or a bubble where they don't think anyone else gets a vote. And especially in our world, attackers get a vote. And I think we dismiss that or write it off and say, we're always being attacked, so what does it matter? Like, sometimes you'll hear that too. And so I think what this really does is, first of all, we don't start with clean slates. Like, we kind of have to defend in situ. So we're good, bad, and different. Your environment is your environment. I think one of the things that you and I used to talk about was there's a lot of great academic approaches here. And I'm going to pick on Zero Trust just a little bit because in theory, in methodology, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a much more secure approach to protecting a company. The problem is, what do you do when you have a mainframe and you have these vendor VPN tunnels and 3 different cloud environments? Now, all of a sudden, to overlay that approach, it's either going to be very complicated or you have to start over. And this is what I mean by you just have to start with whatever's on hand to start defending your company. You can't wait for optimal conditions. It's just not going to happen. You have to start moving. So I like this just as kind of a tongue in cheek because I think we're so used to project plans and schedules and we'll wait. I have a board meeting, so now's not a good time for anyone to attack. That it's just one of these, like, listen, there's never a perfect time. So just be ready, always be getting better. Wake up every morning and say, how can we do a little bit better?
Yeah, no, I can see how that lit that light up. I should say. So, and we've talked in other episodes about prioritizing detections and, the MITRE pieces and like very tactical prioritization and execution. What about strategic prioritization? We might have hinted on it in the past, but I mean, any trench observations or insights from over the years? I mean, this might be a deep question, but
are you trying to get me in trouble with everyone?
I mean, I could also say it, not from a looking back standpoint, but maybe from a, I mean, we've had Jimmy Mills on this podcast. So like when we talk about next generation of leadership, what do we see as a successful sort of strategic prioritization? Is that a better way to ask it?
Sure. And I'll answer it with broad strokes in a sense of what have I seen that isn't holding up to the test of time and what seems to be emerging as better. So in the past, we security groups were very tool driven and reactionary based on whatever the tool said we could do. So meaning the answer to having cloud environments was buy a cloud vulnerability scanner, buy a cloud firewall. I kid you not, like people buy cloud firewalls. It's a thing. So I think what it does is it satiates a sense of we need to feel in control and we need to feel like we know what it's doing. And so to everyone, firewalls made sense in their mind. It's the thing that keeps us away from the big bad internet. And so when you talk about cloud, what's the whoopee? Well, where's that firewall? Put that firewall in rather than, listen, there's security controls out here that act like firewalls that we could configure and we can restrict. So I think it's this sense of we want to be comfortable, and that comfort comes from technologies we can wrap our head around or that we've experienced before. So I think that's kind of, and because of that, our strategies always seem to be aligned with the acquisition and deployment of technology. I think what's more durable these days are people looking at capabilities. And I know we've mentioned this before. So one capability is the ability to detect anomalies. So that could be in a cloud environment, that could be through an EDR technology, but the ability to see is a real capability that security teams need. And I think when you start focusing on stuff like that, then you'll never be caught unprepared, because what you're doing is you're constantly evaluating your efficacy to look, not, well, which firewall do I have? Well, that's not a next gen firewall, so I'm behind. I've seen people survive with traditional antivirus for half a decade with no change. Like, why? Because they viewed it as just a delivery tool of what their capabilities were. And so that's what I think makes you durable, makes you prepared for whenever the battle starts. And I think that's kind of the emergent way here. Tech changes too fast to keep changing or to keep chasing and changing tools. We have to look at capability instead.
Yeah, that's a really deep and intelligent, first principles response. And it triggered me to think about, so we've been in this business for almost 4 years, and, we started with Splunk because we knew Splunk well. And, we knew it scaled well, and a lot of companies had Splunk. So, but, as a small company, as a startup company, we have to ask the question every 3 to 6 months, hey, is this the best platform? What's the emerging technologies? Like, are we betting on the right horse? Are we taking the right approach? Or do we stand to be either deprecated or swallowed up by something that could work better? And, the answer has always been, no, this is the way. And when you talk about being prepared for that enemy, I mean, our ammunition is 100% data, 100% data. And that's why we've stuck with Splunk exclusively, is because that's their superpower, is bringing in all this data from all these different places in near real time. You know, we help normalize it. We help provide the programming that finds those anomalies and stitch them together. But yeah, so I mean,
it's hard to make decisions if you don't have information.
Exactly. And
it just is.
And that information being integrated together from across all these different, I mean, data silos, operating companies, whatever. Yeah, all right. So that was very, very applicable to cybersecurity.
See, we can wander there. We can start with a satirical statement and we can wander into something that might be a nugget for someone out there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's move on to the next one. So the next highlight you have is rule number 15. And it is the rule number 15 of Murphy's Laws of Combat. Anything you do can get you shot, including nothing. I think I know why that resonates with you, but let's unpack it.
Apparently I'm scarred from leadership, apparently. I have seen a tendency for people to kick the can, to say, hey, it's not a big deal right now. Hey, it's so this kind of leads to that other one about timing again, except this one, less than timing. It's more like comfort in doing nothing. And we cannot, in our space, doing nothing is not an option. It just isn't. Like, it is today, but for how long can you do nothing? Depends. Like now you're literally rolling the dice every day. And you and I have kind of seen this. Like we have been hands-on in some environments where they chose to not act on something that attacked them. Like, they dealt with the situation, and then we tried kind of counseling them about here's how to be more secure, and they chose inactivity. They chose nothing. And then it starts a timer about when it happens again. Like, it really does. So what I want is, the way I take this is to not allow too much slack in the line of making sure you're always getting better as a team member, as a leadership team, as a program. Like, every day you should be getting that exercise in to be better at defending your company. Now, notice I'm not saying buy more things. Some of this, like, activity could be learn your logs better. Like, when you don't have an alert right now, just randomly dig through data. Just randomly start poking around and saying, hey, what else is coming in? Or what's a weird behavior? Or read some articles about the latest attacks that are going on, and just do some random searches. Like, hey, I wonder if that file name is somewhere in our data. But definitely err on the side of do something, because no matter what, you're going to get hit by something. So the best way to kind of meet it prepared and head on and calm is the fact that you don't fall into this lull of inactivity. And so to me, this is a call to action for leaders to continually push getting better. Don't let this just be on a budget sheet where you say not this fiscal year, because that it's just not going to help. It's not going to work out.
Well, that goes back to kind of the strategic point from the first law. And the opposite is true, where we see all this constant firefighting and whack-a-mole. And when you have this flood of chasing things, you're basically just responding and reacting. And you have to, if you don't take the strategic initiative to step back and do some root cause, or change the system, or the way that system was built, then you're doomed to, even though you're working super, and this is the Red Queen problem, right? The Alice in Wonderland mnemonic or whatever that we talk about, where, yeah, we're working as hard as we can. We're on 24/7. We're fixing all of these things, but they're fixing all the symptoms and running as fast as they can, but essentially staying in place, which over time means you're going to fall behind.
Yeah. And so this is maybe a balance to show there's a dichotomy, which is action doesn't equal results. So that first one we're talking about, listen, we need to show results, learn how to get more capable and focus on the right things, because you never know when something's going to hit. This one is saying, don't just sit back. Don't just wait for something to happen. Get better. Like, so maybe what this is trying to do is balance that scale to say, hey, there is middle ground here where we're not running around, but we're also not just taking a knee. Like, there is a balance in here somewhere. And the other thing that I really want to highlight here is sometimes I get really frustrated with either startup sayings or these development sayings, and MVP, whoever decided minimum viable product should be used in cybersecurity. I would like to have a conversation with you some point.
Come on over. Let's have a conversation.
This idea of, because what happened was it's catchy. It's catchy. The principles make sense. And unfortunately, leadership said, well, that makes sense to us. We can wrap up all these technology projects quickly in security. And so what happens when a leadership group focuses on MVP in the security world? Integrations don't happen. Trainings don't necessarily happen. Not deep training, not like you attended it, but that's different than how to use this as a weapon. The other piece, maintenance, doesn't happen. Features don't always get turned on. And so this idea of minimum viable product, if you don't have someone who understands what that means to this technology, they're literally going to say it's installed in your environment and move on. And so that results in some of this do nothing. Why would we invest more? It's done. And so that's some of this inactivity.
Well, and it's what you just described. What I heard was essentially it's this scattershot approach, right? Like, because it's not just the one thing; it's kind of all over the board. And it, if you do one thing well, do a lot of things at once poorly, kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
All right, and I think I'm stitching a theme together here. So the last one you got highlighted for today, and I went through one or two of the laws of combat lists. So
did you pick a couple?
I picked a couple. But so the third one you've got is rule number 20. So Murphy's laws of combat, rule number 20: never forget that your weapon is made by the lowest bidder.
This made my heart cry a little bit. Just a little bit. I think, yeah. So after I pulled myself together after hearing this and it hurting a little, especially now being in the vendor space, right? Like it's wow, that's a tough pill to swallow. Have I seen this happen in the security space? 100%. I can't tell you how many tools I've had to work on or enable because it was included with some other thing we bought. So here's the positive. So the negative is you frequently ask for a car and what shows up is a lawnmower. Like it happens. Like, so I think as people in the security space, whether you're an individual contributor or a manager, I think your superpower here can be, how do you make the most out of the lowest bidder item? Because if you can figure that out, that's amazing. Because now what you're doing is you're unlocking the real mechanics of what's happening in the space and that tool. So when I was talking about, we've seen traditional antivirus outperform EDR products. Why was that? Well, that's because that team knew they were stuck with a lawnmower and not a riding one, barely a gas one. And so, but what happened was they took that as a challenge to say, well, if they're not going to replace it, we better squeeze every piece of value out of this platform as possible. And it got to a point where even the vendor said, how did you configure this so securely? Because they had never seen anyone use it. And this is back to that, like, turn it on, walk away. Just don't do that. Like, honestly, the tools that are being released now are very powerful compared to a decade ago. There's so many options and features. The problem is they're underdocumented or not known well. So you need to give your team this chance to explore and test in order to figure out how best to leverage things. So while this could be seen as a negative, like, yeah, like we never get the Cadillac of anything around here, that's fine. How can we make the most of it? And the other thing that I want to point out is, the way I read this, it's not the tools that are making you a great security program. It's the people who master the tools that make you a great security program. And if there's anything, if there's leaders listening, just let that sink in. It is not the list of tools you've acquired and turned on that you are being successful or getting better. It is the people on your team that are learning those tools and leveraging them. That's your success factor. Because I bet tomorrow you could switch that tool out and you would still be successful because of that team. So from an individual contributor, learn to master your tools regardless of how good they are. As a leader, start recognizing that the difference maker is your team and start giving them some of that room to truly master, not just learn, but master what you have made an investment in.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful charge. And I'd even take it a step earlier. And I mean, the first step is not only for the practitioners, but also for the leaders, just to say, all right, what do we have now? And is there information or data or capabilities that we can leverage in concert, right? So it's an integration. It's integration first, buy something else second, right? Or let's integrate and maximize value from our stack here. And then when we have that figured out, we can identify the gaps and then try to fill that gap, not just kind of pile of stuff on top of each other. So, and that's also insightful because we spend a lot of time indirectly talking to customers about this, right? So like,
yeah.
So as a company or a customer, even a leader, when you're looking at vendors and partners, don't just, I mean, you can't afford to get somebody that just turns stuff on like anybody can, right? What makes a difference are partners that truly understand the integration of these things, right? So their primary tool or tool set or whatever, but they understand how you can work them together from a technology standpoint, from a workflow standpoint, a data standpoint. And then I think also, and what we found in security especially, is you also need that partner to understand kind of the jobs to be done or the business that you're in. And in our case, it's the business of security, right? So like the tools are great, the workflows are great, but it has to work together to achieve an outcome that is measurable, that's impactful, you know, and for us, it's high stakes, right? Because it's the security of the organization and the company. So So yeah, that was you just kind of highlighted that to me. And we don't talk about that directly a lot, like I said, but like it's embedded in essentially everything we do every day.
So when we go into customer environments, we literally just go into their Splunk environment. No one opens up their EDR portal or their cloud port. No one does that. But for some reason, every time we go into a Splunk instance, it's like the first half hour, the customer ends up apologizing for everything. I'm sorry we don't have a better EDR tool. This is the one that was included. I'm sorry we don't have better blocking on the firewalls. It's where we're currently at. It's almost like the first half hour, they just have to like get all of these apologies out because they feel like someone's going to judge them. And once we exercise all of that out, all that shame comes out. Now we can start with, listen, it's reality. It's where you're at. Like there's no judgment because I've seen people better and I've seen people worse. Like it's not a judgment. What's more important is now we're going to do something about it. Let's get involved. Let's get active. Let's do something about it. We were working with a customer where literally at the beginning of the engagement, they didn't believe in blocking IPs, even if they're malicious on their firewalls. They didn't see the value in it because it's easy for an attacker to change their IP. Totally agree. And individually setting and blocking IP addresses is a ton of work. It runs the risk of what if I put the wrong IP address in? Yeah, like it's kind of risky. It's minimal value. But what if we could take a threat intel feed and start blocking it? Then you start removing all this human intervention. You remove some of this risk of mistyping something. And what would that do to your environment? And we've seen massive drops in the amount of intrusion detection alerts, legitimate attacks, threat intel matches. Like it's almost as if you let your environment breathe again simply because you evicted these malicious actors further out of your environment. And it's that I think highlights this idea of work with people who understand the business you're in, because that was contributing to their inability to alert or respond. It was burning out analysts because they kept seeing the same stuff over and over, and it was just confusing the whole place. But what did we do? We talked to them about, okay, what tools do you have in the toolbox? Let's make them work for you to achieve an outcome that only big enterprises dream of getting. And this was a team of 3-4 people. This was not a 200-person security organization. This 3-4 people are now absolutely crushing it because they've gotten involved. They're mastering their tools. They're understanding what levers to pull in different tools to get the outcomes they want.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent summary and kind of bringing it back to the rule itself. So, never forget that your weapon is made by the lowest bidder. Basically, the bare metal of it is useless, right? It only becomes effective when it's in the hands of the warrior for its intended purpose, right?
Yep.
The scalpel in the hands of the surgeon is another way to look at it.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure those are bought at thousands of dozens of quantities are as cheap as possible.
Yeah. Where a penny a scalpel matters.
Yeah, cheap but reliable. All right. Well, those are your three. I'm going to kind of just quickly ping on some of the ones that I pulled out. My first one really made me think about cybersecurity, actually, and that is rule number 7, which is professionals are predictable. It's the amateurs that are dangerous. And that immediately made me think kind of from an attacker perspective, right? We know, I mean, I don't know if we haven't really talked about the business of attackers yet. I think you might have a blog post about the economics of it once upon a time. But I mean, if you think about it, and these ATPs and these organizations that are, making a lot of money on attacking, ransoming, what have you, they're a business, right? It's economics that drives them. And I mean, I'm only postulating and like imagining, but if I was running an organization like that, I mean, what your success rate is or what you can deliver or output as an attacker is your that's how they judge you. Like that's how good you are or not, right? What's your productivity? And so I would imagine it to be, as close to a meritocracy, what have you done for me lately kind of operation. So imagine like massive amounts of turnover for those that are inexperienced, or maybe they didn't figure it out or not that good. So you're probably constantly having new talent come in that is ambitious and not, I mean, these people are smart and they're educated and they have nothing to lose essentially by being aggressive and creative and things like that. So, I mean, we might be up against these outlier amateurs every hour of every day, and it's a unlimited stream of them. I don't know. I mean, but it's feasible.
I think the big problem is attackers is way too general of a description these days. Yes, we have to defend against this pool called attackers, but there was this release of they called them the Conti playbooks release. So it's a ransomware crime gang. These guys had troubleshooting guides to the attack scripts they wrote. That to me is this professional is predictable, because if you're training your help to attack and how to ransomware people, you're going to become extremely predictable because you have these playbooks. You have now become a business, and businesses start becoming predictable. The on the other side, so okay, so what kind of attackers are not predictable? That's when you go, it's almost like the bell curve, right? Like the most of the attacks are in the middle. They're probably criminal gangs. And to be honest, they follow any zero-day exploits that get them remote access. They try the tried and true spray and pray with passwords that are in breaches, and they follow these playbooks. That to me is like dead center bell curve. That's what we're up against. The edges are these people who like just randomly figure things out. These are the people who like find 0 days and don't disclose them because they know they can sell them to the middle of the bell curve, make money. And then on the other side are the people that no one talks about. These people that kind of move in the shadows, who have near unlimited resources. They're the other ones. They're not predictable. Why? They're not running playbooks. They're figuring out mission objectives. And there is no playbook to achieve the objective, except don't get caught.
So
that's literally the playbook. Don't get caught.
So that's really interesting. So I took it from one angle and then you've basically instantly flipped it. But that point's also interesting and important because a lot of these organizations are very professional and therefore predictable, which, the note I made is that confirms why these fundamentals are so important, right? Like, known malicious IP blocking. You can change your IP, but they don't have time to do that because they're just looking for people that don't do it and see how far they get.
Well, their framework's already set up and that's not their job. Their job is to use the infrastructure to execute this play. So essentially, we're exploiting the flaw of them trying to scale. So here's another way of the other way of reframing that one real quick is let's look at security teams. Professionals, predictable. Amateurs are the wild card. Some of the most successful security teams I've seen are small. Not big, well-oiled, like they have a threat intel team and a emerging threat team and a detection engineering pipeline, because it brings predictability. So like there was an environment I was working in. There was an outside red teamer who we were friends with, who was talking about how he gets in every single time. and it was this executable that he had. He burned 11 different executables in this environment that got him through every other customer, big, small, middle. And he freaked out because it took him forever to write some of this. And now the antivirus stuff is starting to grab it and send it out across the world. So he got angry with us. He's like, why do you keep burning my stuff? And we're like, dude, what? We're not doing any. You can remote in and see. We're not doing anything. The reason why.
Oh, he thought you were intentionally like.
Right. He thought we were trying to burn his stuff, and we weren't. We were trying to help him and make sure our controls were tight. What was the difference? We went all crazy on the configuration of our endpoint. And that's what he didn't count on. He counted on this predictability that no one will do this because it's too difficult, or no one knows, or no one will put the effort in. And so if you hear that saying that you just brought up, stay hungry amateur, because the minute you become predictable inside your own security organization is where the blind spots start. So you need to have a team. I don't care if it's your threat hunt team or someone. There needs to be this level of always hungry, always pushing those boundaries to keep it erratic enough that no one can quite pinpoint how did something work. Because I guarantee attackers are flipping through all of the technology books that you are. They're looking at the configs, and they're actually sending you things to see which control might have caught them. 100% that's what they're doing.
Yeah. No, excellent. I did find another list. It had 33 laws on it. So somebody expanded on it a little bit. So not to pivot out of Jocko's core list, but I'll close with a couple of these because I think they really underscore a lot of things that we've been talking about in the last like 30 minutes. And this list has rule number 2 as, if it's stupid but works, it isn't stupid. So exactly what you said. On this list, 13 and 14 are, the important things are always simple, followed by the simple things are always hard, which brings us back to the one that is on the first list we worked with, and that is, the easy way is always mined. So yeah. So that's the caveat of all of this, and I think
the other one kind of on that is, if there's a goat trail or a road, always pick the goat trail, because the road is probably mined. So it's one of those where it's like, and here this goes back to predictable, right? Like there's all these kind of similarities and like thematic threads to all of this, which is stay hungry, always be improving, learn to master your tools. Like it's just that. And you do that. I don't care what tech stack you have. You're going to win. You're going to evict attackers out of your environment if that's what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a perfect wrap up. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stuart, did it live up to your expectations?
For me, it totally did. And I hope, listen, the reason I love tongue in cheek is because if it hurts a little or you laugh a little, there's clearly something in your world that it's either mimicking or paralleling. And what I enjoy about these, or some of the mental model talks that you and I have had, anything to get you out of the technical or super space specific things to start altering your view. Like, how can we change the way I'm looking at this? What are the dynamics really going on, and what can I influence, and what do I have to battle? And so I think hopefully this conversation leads to some of that, which is, I never thought of it in that perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, we talk about the concept of mental models a lot. I've included it in a couple of talks that I've given, and Absolutely. That's the strategy, and that's the output is let's take some different perspectives or points of view, flip everything around and just see what we see how it feels. And you can always go back. It's easy to go back to your way of thinking, but this is a let's look at it from a different angle and see what we see if it looks different.
Yeah. Hope this helps.
Well, like I said, hope you enjoyed this episode. We do like getting abstract from time to time. We definitely have a lot of offline conversations to that effect. So you can connect with us at our website, outpost-security.com. Stuart and I are also on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with us there. As I mentioned earlier, we have the RBA community at rba.community. And then our Slack space is linked in all of those places. But you can get it directly at Outpost. Why can't I say Outpost today? Outpost-security.com/Slack. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to the next episode. Appreciate all the listeners and support, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Outpost RBA podcast. Stuart McIntosh has over 20 years of experience building and maturing security programs inside Fortune 500 companies. In 2018, he gave a talk at Splunks.conf titled "Say Goodbye to Your Big Alert Pipeline and Say Hello to Your New Risk-Based Approach," which started the rise of RBA. As the creator and architect of risk-based alerting, he pioneers security methodologies at Outpost Security, which he co-founded with Will. Will Robus has spent the last 20 years in the operations or financial C-suites at technology and security companies, focused on what drives results and successful scaling. At Outpost Security, he works with CISOs to imagine a more expansive future for their SOC, once it has a solid RBA foundation. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share it with your security team and CISO. Connect with us on LinkedIn. And contact us at outpost-security.com to lift your team out of the fog of alert confusion with RBA 0 to 1.